So good evening, everyone. Welcome to another online session. Today's topic is really interesting. Because of the COVID and the pandemic and what is happening in the world, there is some sort of rise of online learning, and there is also a need for educators and teachers to learn how to teach in this new situation. So tonight we have an expert. We have Michelle. She will talk actually, or she will answer some of the questions we received about how to integrate technology into our classroom practices, especially blended learning, because this is her area of experience, I think. So, hi, Michelle.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, can you talk a little bit, introduce yourself, maybe to the audience, about your background, your school, your activities, or your project, and then we can start discussing the questions, okay?
Sounds great. Yes, so I am Michel Eaton. I am the Director of Virtual and Blended Learning for a school district in the United States, in Indiana. So in that role, I oversee course development and professional learning for our online schools and then all of the blended programs K through 12. So whether that's blended learning happening in a more traditional classroom or in alternate settings. I am also the author of the book, The Perfect Blend, which is a guide for traditional K-12 classroom teachers about how we can leverage online learning in our classrooms to maximize instructional time.
Great. So maybe we'll start with the first question. In simple terms, for those people who don't know what is blended learning, what is blended learning in simple terms? For an educator who had never integrated technology in his class, would like to know about this approach.
So blended learning is, simply put, just any combination of online learning. So that means instruction and assessment happening online, not just using technology, but using it to teach. So any combination of online learning and more face-to-face instruction. So that is a pretty vague definition. And what that means is that blended learning takes many forms. Over the past year, we've seen it in a lot of different ways. Some schools that are hybrid, so students are coming in a couple of days a week and working from home the rest of the week. That's a form of blended learning because, again, it's a combination of online learning and face-to-face learning. As we come back 100% into classrooms, blended learning can also look quite a bit different, with online learning taking a smaller role. So I'm a former second grade teacher, and blended learning in my classroom often looked like station rotation, where students were working in stations and meeting with me in small groups. And at some point they're going through a small online lesson. And because that was a combination of those two things, that is blended learning too. So I think that's where a lot of the confusion comes with the term, is that it can be a lot of different things, but really simply it's just a combination of online learning and more traditional learning.
Yes, and where is flipped learning in all this?
Yeah, so flipped learning is a form of blended learning where there's online instruction happening at home for homework, and then the students come into class for more traditional hands-on experiences. So that's a form of blended learning too. And I think what we can take from this year, where we've been forced to use certain types of blended learning as an emergency response to a pandemic and to keep learning going and keep kids safe, while we may not maintain these models of blended learning moving forward, we have learned a lot about how we can leverage online learning, and we can take that with us and do things like the flipped classroom or a station rotation, or use online learning in our classrooms while students are working independently to free us up to do things like work in small groups with students, personalized, individualized instruction.
I know that you have mentioned one type of blended learning, which is the station rotation model, right?
Mhm.
Do you think this one is effective? And if yes, why?
So my opinion about the different models is that there's not one that I think works better than another. A lot of it comes down to what your goals are for the students and what your teaching style and what it is you're teaching. So station rotation can be really effective. I think one of the strengths of station rotation blended learning is that it is very good for differentiation. So I often think about the different models of blended learning through the lens of differentiation or personalization. And the biggest difference between those two terms, if differentiation involves the decisions, the things that a teacher, the changes a teacher makes to help a student be successful, then personalization involves the changes that a student makes for themselves to be successful. So both those things have a place in the modern classroom. I think the station rotation model gives the teachers a lot of control. And so it's really great for differentiation, meeting students' needs. I think there are other models of blended learning that are better for personalization, for allowing students to take some autonomy in their learning, to gain some agency. And so it really depends on what you want the role of the student to be and what you want the role of the teacher to be. That helps determine which model is going to be best for you.
Michelle, I know that this amazing background represents the cover of your book,
Yeah.
which I have questions about your book. I will leave them maybe at the end of the session.
Okay.
Yes, and we will talk more about your book, about the activities that you have in your book, about how they are centered on learners, etc. Let me move to the which technologies you think, or which learning management systems you think are perfect or are suitable for the blended learning approach. You know that some teachers like different learning management systems, but which one you think is easy, simple for both student and teachers?
This is a tough question, and I'm probably not going to answer it the way that you want or expect, but I think the best learning management system to use is the one that you are comfortable with using and the one that your district or your school is using. I think creating consistency for students is important. I think which platform you use matters less than it does that we're creating a consistent, clear, intuitive experience for students. My thoughts on blended learning, when I'm speaking about blended learning, when I was writing about it in the book, very little of it, I think, has to do with technology. Technology is the tool that allows us to blend. Obviously, it's about online learning. But really, the reason we do this is to maximize those people, those human interactions. It frees a teacher up to do what only a human in the classroom can do. And so I think that should always be the focus of blended learning, is thinking about what technology can I use to maximize myself as the instructor and to give my students some control over their learning. And honestly, you can create great blended learning and online experiences with an expensive learning management system. You can do it with the free platforms that are available. You can do it using a set of Google Slides or PowerPoint slides or a website. I think where the learning is happening matters less than following some design principles and leveraging the platform you have available to you in the best way that you can.
Yes, but what is your favorite one? I know that you said that this is you have a favorite one. Maybe it's Google Classroom or something. Do you have a favorite one?
So in my school district, we use It's Learning, and that's our learning management system. I'm a big fan of it. I really like using it. And I always recommend to the teachers in my school district, since this is the one that our district has adopted, and that's the one that we can support. We should all try to use that one. I know I have colleagues that are really happy in Canvas or in Google Classroom. But yeah, It's Learning is the one that I use personally.
Okay, good. You know that videos are a great technological tool, especially in both approaches, in blended learning and in flipped learning, and also in traditional classroom settings. What are some of the tips you can suggest for teachers to use this powerful tool, especially in a blended learning approach? Do they have to be short, for example, or do they have to include certain elements of illustrations and pictures?
So when leveraging video, one of the best rules of thumb is to keep them short. The exact number of minutes, some people will recommend different numbers. I found some research that suggests that we should keep all videos less than 6 minutes long. So I think the shorter that we can create the video instruction, the more likely we're going to help students stay engaged, but then also effectively process information. The second thing I'd recommend is to not stress out so much about videos looking perfect or you sounding perfect on the video. What's more important is your presence. So putting yourself in videos as often as possible. And even if that just means I'm creating a quick video announcement or I'm leaving audio or video feedback for students, doing that frequently adds a human element into online lessons that are really important. It's important for student engagement. It helps with academic achievement. It even helps with academic integrity. And your presence in online lessons impacts the likelihood of students are to cheat. So worry less about, oh, I stumbled over my words or my hair doesn't look so great in this video. Your students don't care about that. But I promise you, they're more interested in a mediocre video that you've created, that their teacher, that's someone that they know is in, versus something that has been produced and is you find on YouTube from an expert. I do think there's a balance of working smarter, not harder. And there's a lot of great content out there that we can leverage, but creating your own videos, I think, is really powerful. And then the third piece of advice I would give about video instruction is to remember that just because we're using technology doesn't mean that that's improving instruction. So taking a lecture, maybe let's take a boring lecture face to face, putting it into a video doesn't make it any less of a boring lecture. And when we're talking about flipped learning, if you're going to take a boring lecture and put it online, but have them do it at home where there are a ton of other things that they could be doing instead of watching that video, we haven't solved any problems. And so I like to think about how I can turn those activities that are just consumption activities. So I'm just going to watch this video, or I'm just going to read this text, and how can I make it an active experience? So I like using tools like Edpuzzle, for instance. Edpuzzle allows you to grab a video from YouTube or upload your own video and then make it interactive. So you can add in questions that students can answer. You can pause the video and record audio to alert students to something you want them to see. And then you can get all of that data. So on your teacher dashboard, you can see how students have answered the questions. And you can even see lots of data like how much of the video did students watch, how many times did they watch it to answer questions. That turns those consumption activities, or I'm just going to take in this content, into an active learning experience that gives the teacher actionable data that they can use to make artful instructional decisions when they have the students face to face.
Yes, so it depends on the teacher, not on the technology, because technology only enhances the things that we are already doing in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
It's a great amplifier. It can amplify really good practice, but it can also put a spotlight on some things that we probably should change too. So technology is not the silver bullet. It's not the thing that fixes anything. Just like anything, it can be used well, it can be used poorly. So keeping in mind, my general rule of thumb is, does the technology use allow me to build connections with students, and does it free me up to truly personalize learning for the kids in my class? And then if it does, it's probably a good use of technology.
Yes, this will lead us to talk about community. Some teachers asked about community building and student interaction in a blended learning setting. What are the tools you think are effective to guarantee this community building, this sense of community in a blended learning setting?
Well, specifically when students are remote, I think there are several things that we can do to create those social experiences for students. But if we're thinking about creating community throughout the whole school year within the academic content and academic experiences that we've created, I like to think about designing those online experiences through the lens of interaction. And in every single digital lesson, I look for 3 types of interaction: student to teacher interaction, student to student interaction, and student to content interaction. And the first 2 specifically help build community. When we have meaningful interaction between the student and the teacher, with actionable feedback being given and a connection being built there, that's a way that we humanize the experience. And then, of course, making sure that we're not creating online or blended learning that is really isolating. It can be easy to do that, where we create these experiences that are just the student and the computer. But if we're intentional, we can really create a highly collaborative, connected experience by leveraging tools that allow students to connect with each other. So regardless of whatever tools it is that you are choosing, and I think that is so personal, I have my online learning toolbox of the tools that I like to use in the lessons that I create, but it might be different than those of you watching right now, and that's perfectly fine. But I try to make sure that I'm selecting tools and creating experiences that are regularly getting students to connect. I think creating opportunities for students to socialize, all of that's really important, but we can move beyond that and help them connect over content and instructional experiences as well.
Yes, you mentioned about lessons. Or do you have like a favorite technology model, like maybe the summer or the TPAC, or for integrating technology into the classroom? And which one you think it's effective?
I think I don't necessarily use a framework. I'm familiar with a lot of them, but we don't officially adopt one in our school district. I think they can all be used well, as long as it's helping us think about using technology, not just for the sake of technology, but to elevate learning in the classroom. So I don't use one specifically, but I think of the ones that I'm familiar with, I think that they all have merit in that it helps us think intentionally about our technology use.
Yes, okay. You know that today's students are digital natives. They are well versed in technology, social media. They probably know more than teachers in some areas, especially in Facebook, etc. What's the best approach what's the best approach you think that maybe how can we exploit this passion, this knowledge that students possess, and use it for our to build to create digital learning experiences?
That's a great question. I think one of the best things we can do is to get feedback from our students regularly, and this is something that's pretty simple to do. But I encouraged a lot of the teachers I worked with, especially as we went remote, and they're learning how to design experiences and having some success and sometimes not seeing success with their students. And many of those teachers that I worked with started just regularly reaching out to students, whether it was a quick form or a quick assignment, asking them to give feedback on the experiences. What do you like? What's not working for you? What ideas do you have? And I think that simple act is really powerful because, one, it leverages the expertise that students do bring to the table. And so they're going to be able to give you ideas for ways to improve the experience for them. But then I also think it increases engagement and motivation because not only do students see that their thoughts and their opinions matter, but then when you actually implement some of their ideas, they see that those thoughts and opinions can actively influence what learning looks like for them. So I think that's one of the best things you can do. I also, though, I would caution everyone that we don't look too much into this whole digital natives, digital immigrants idea. I actually have some problems with those terms, and mostly because when we think about students as digital natives, that doesn't mean that they come out of the womb knowing how to use an iPad for their learning, right? It means that they're probably better at TikTok than I am. But when it comes to using learning technologies for their learning or for some of the assignments that, or using a learning management system, they have to learn it just like we do. And so my general rule of thumb is to really limit the number of technology tools that you are using. Find tools that you can use in a lot of different ways, but I don't regularly introduce a lot of new tools. I have five tools that I use pretty consistently in the online lessons that I create, whether they're for K-12 students or they're for adult learners. I have these tools that are my go-to, and my learners know how to use them. And I don't spend a lot of time teaching new tools or learning them myself. I get straight to the learning. When we move online, things sometimes take a little bit longer. So the more that we can simplify that experience, the better. So I think having students that are technically savvy and love using technology doesn't necessarily mean we have to be constantly introducing new tools. It is okay to have a small online learning toolbox and leverage those tools in a lot of ways.
So just 5 tools. We have a lot of technologies. Okay, I think you are right in this point because it takes time to be an expert in something.
Mhm.
Because if we bombard students with so many technologies, we'll get lost in all this. Yes. So, Michelle, you mentioned feedback.
Mhm.
And so we will talk a little bit about assessment.
Okay.
So are there any maybe tools to be integrated in this approach, in the learning approach? You mentioned Edpuzzle, maybe it can be used for maybe for formative assessment or creating short quizzes. What's the best strategy to assess students online?
I think
It's challenging, right?
it is a challenging question, but let me share one of the most important lessons I learned about teaching online and assessment. And that was that I had to shift my mindset about assessment online as something that students submitted to something that students published. And that making that shift in how we design assessment was really important, especially in getting students engaged and motivated in those online experiences. And so instead of creating only assignments that students submit privately to me, I'm always thinking about how can I have them publish this information? And that doesn't even mean globally or for an audience even larger than your classroom, but how can I create community-based assessment where students are publicly sharing their ideas? I think that helps with building community. It creates opportunities for student-to-student interaction, but it also increases engagement and motivation. So certainly there is a time and place for students to submit, privately submit assessment, but that shouldn't be the whole strategy. So tools that I like to use are pretty simple. Like we use Google Workspace here in my school district, so I use Google for everything. And if I can create collaborative notes in Google Docs, or if I can create a Google slideshow and each student takes a slide where they're putting their response, where they can see the responses of their peers, they can comment and collaborate instead of maybe submitting that reflection or that thought privately. I do that. I also like using tools like Padlet for this, a similar reason, a place where they can publicly share and brainstorm and benefit from the ideas and the thoughts of their peers. So Padlet is in my toolbox, anything Google. And then I also really like using Flipgrid. Similar reason to the others that I've explained, this public space, even if that community is simply our classroom that we're sharing in, that's powerful. But then also remembering that learning doesn't need to be silent. Our classrooms aren't silent places. We're constantly talking to students, they're talking to us and to each other. But when we design online lessons, we can quickly create only text-based experiences where the students don't engage with language around academic content. So I like using tools like Flipgrid because it is a pretty effective, efficient way for me to get students speaking and listening. And those skills, those activities are absolutely critical. They are obviously really important for our emerging readers. They're absolutely necessary for our emerging bilingual and multilingual learners, but it's just good practice for all students. So keeping that in mind in assessment too, that it doesn't have to just be text-based, can be helpful as well.
So do you offer your students digital badges?
Do I offer them? I'm sorry, you broke up a second. Do I offer them what?
Said, do you offer them digital badges as a way to motivate and engage them? And if the answer is yes, what tools do you use? Or maybe you use one that are already designed?
I don't do digital badging. So that's not something that I've personally done. So I don't have any experience with that, but I know some folks that have. I think it's an interesting form of gamification in the classroom, but not something that I know too much about.
Okay, so let's move to your book. First of all, why did you call it the perfect blend? Is it perfect?
Well, the point of the perfect blend is the message I wanted to get across was that the perfect blended learning environment is not a recipe that you can follow step by step. There is not one exact way to blend a classroom. That so much of it has to do with what you want the student role to be, what the teacher's role is going to be in the classroom, your own teaching style, the unique needs of your students, the content that you're teaching. There's so many factors and choices that can come into play that your classroom is a unique place, and so should your blended learning model. So it was really, the message was the perfect blend is more of a homemade recipe, and that is very personal to you and your students.
I personally, I love the cover of the book. It's very attractive, interesting, and the title is also great. What is there a secret behind your choice of these different colors, blue and red?
So I worked with the publishing team at ISTE. After we wrote the book that submitted the manuscript, we were working on the design elements, and they just kind of asked me, you know, for input on what I liked. And I said, I have a pretty colorful personality. I'd like the cover of the book to reflect that. So I was like, I like bright colors. And the design team ran with it. I think they did a really great job of blending these colors together and creating a pretty fun color cover. But that the kudos goes all to them. The design team at ISTE has been great.
Do you think of maybe writing a second edition?
I am thinking about writing another book. It's funny, I submitted this manuscript right about the time that we all started having to go home because of COVID. So I had pretty much just finished the book. So in a lot of these podcasts and like Facebook Lives that I'm doing, I always get asked, if you could go back in time, would you add a chapter and what would you add? And certainly, had I had been able to predict that the whole world was going to be going online and blended, there certainly would have been a couple of chapters I would have added. And so as I've been working with schools and school districts around the country and around the world, as they have been responding to teaching during a pandemic, I think there have been a lot of new things that we have all learned. So I am hoping to expand, do some more writing specifically on online learning and how we can create highly interactive experiences. So nothing official yet, but it's definitely been on my mind.
Yes. So can you talk, about the main elements of your book? What are the objectives, the audience? Is it for teachers who are great in using technology, or maybe for just teachers, regular teachers, or is it addressed to everyone?
I tried to create a book that was accessible for all teachers. So there's something, if you are a little bit more technology hesitant, I think you can pick this book up and learn something new. I think any teacher can blend in their classroom. And I also point out multiple times in the book some things that a lot of teachers are already doing, and they may not even realize how close they are to blending. And so I wanted to build on the strengths of that teachers have already, and then taking that next step to blend the classroom. But I also wanted to create a book that even some of the teachers who are already blending could maybe learn something new to elevate their practice. So I worked really hard to create a book that I thought was practical and could be used by a wide range of teachers or coaches or leaders. So when I wrote the book, practicality was really important. I wanted every chapter for our teachers to walk away with strategies, ideas, templates, things that they could implement immediately into their classroom. So that was critical. And then the format of the book itself is basically broken up into two parts. So at the beginning of this chat, I talked about what blended learning is, being a combination of face-to-face learning and online learning. And I pretty much broke the book up into those two sections too. So the first part is about choosing the model. How do you set up your face-to-face classroom for blended learning, and really focused on not necessarily just let's choose a model and implement it with efficacy, but let's think about the models that are going to give students the right amount of autonomy and student agency in the classroom so that we can increase engagement and increase academic achievement. So that is the first part of the book. There are lots of templates and resources that you could take as you kind of formulate your perfect blend. And then the second half really focuses in on the online learning piece and looking at digital design principles and how we can design those online lessons that we either can use in a fully remote situation, or you can use in smaller ways in your traditional classroom. But the reality is we learn differently online than we do face-to-face, and we engage with digital resources in different ways that we engage with print resources. So the second half of the book is really about how do I design and curate those online experiences to maximize retention of information and improve the learning experience for students. So that's kind of the makeup of the book and the thought process behind it.
Yes, I know also that the activities center on the students. They are built around the students. They are student-centered.
Yes, that was a main goal of the whole book. Was, again, we're not just using technology for the sake of technology, but I think blended learning does two really important things for us. One, it maximizes your instructional time. So for me, as a second grade teacher, small group instruction was paramount in my classroom. That was how I helped develop readers and writers in my class. So it was important for me to work one-on-one or in those small groups. It made it easier for me to individualize instruction for the students. That means that I have students working independently at some points during the day. If I can use online learning instead of just practice activities, then that means teaching and learning can be happening even if I'm not the one directly synchronously leading it. So in a way, it cloned me in the classroom where I could be a teacher in that independent workspace while simultaneously being a teacher in small group instruction. So I think that's one thing. But the other, like you said, the second critical thing that I think blended learning allows us to do is to really center learning around the students. And so the blended learning models that we talk about and the templates that I share in the book are really about how can we give students some control over the pace of their learning, or maybe the path, the content, that their activities that they're completing, or the time or the place of learning. And so all of the models and strategies shared are really there to amplify that experience for students, because I think we all can agree that if we can get students in the driver's seat of their learning and teach them what it means to be a reflective, self-guided, independent learner, then we can truly create lifelong learners for when they leave our classroom.
By the way, Michel, I'm still waiting for the stickers, the blended learning stickers.
It never got to you? Oh no, I might need to send it again.
Okay, I just want to put them in my portfolio.
Okay, perfect. I'll check on that. I'll send that again.
Okay, that was a great session, really. So maybe, Michel, can you share some of the challenges you faced while writing your book? The challenges that you faced and the how you managed to confront them and to solve them. Because it's not easy to write a book about technology integration. It's not a piece of cake. It takes time. It takes effort. You do some search, etc.
So I love the process of writing. I really do enjoy writing. So of course it's time consuming, and so it's after work. I'm sitting down and getting some writing done, and so you have to prioritize this compared to maybe and give up a few other things to get this done in a timely manner.
Yes.
I think but I enjoy it. I enjoyed the topic and I enjoy writing. So I don't think that so much was as much of a challenge as, if I'm being completely kind of vulnerable and transparent, it is intimidating to think about writing a book that other teachers are going to be using. Like I wanted to do a really good job. And so as I was writing, I constantly just felt a little bit of anxiety about, wanting it to be really high quality, and then, putting it out there for Amazon to get, reviewed and viewed by lots of other people. It's a little bit scary, to be honest. So I think that was the hardest, the biggest challenge for me, was getting past that mental roadblock.
Yes, maybe in your case it is not challenging because you love what you do. You are interested in what you do. So the fact that you love what you do, it makes the challenges easy.
Absolutely. As far as the content, I believe, like, I wrote this book pre-COVID. So I wrote this book because I believe so much in blended learning. It made me a better teacher. I see what it can do for students. And so I believe so much in the content. That piece, that was easy because I love the topic and I was eager to share what I've learned over the last several years.
So Michel, thank you so much for sharing all these great tips with us at Everyone Academy. Maybe you can share 3 or 4 tips for educators who are not willing to integrate technology, or maybe who have connectivity problems, who are not trained to use technology in their classrooms. What are the tips, 4 main tips that you can share with those teachers?
I think there are 2 big tips that I would give. First is, it's okay to start small, to just start somewhere. In the book, I shared that taking one small step forward makes it easier to take the next step forward. So don't feel like you have to have it all figured out, or that you have to, on day one, create this highly personalized, really technology-rich experience. Just finding that one thing that you're interested in, that you're willing to try, and doing that is huge. And then the second piece of advice I would give is to remember that it's never going to be perfect. Even though I know the title of the book is The Perfect Blend. It may be a little bit contradictory, but I view the work that I do as a constant evolution. I'm constantly learning and building on what works and iterating and trying to improve. And I think we should view everything we do in the classroom in that kind of lab mindset. So some things are not going to work, and it's okay. And I think get feedback from your students and take a mindset of I'm gonna learn what went well, what the positives are, and I'm going to experiment and take another step forward to iterate and improve those experiences.
Okay, so the two tips: start small and don't panic.
Right, exactly.
So thank you so much for this great session. We really enjoyed talking to you, and hope to have another session with you when you complete the second edition, of course.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thanks so much for having me.
So thank you, and bye-bye.